In this discussion, we will delve into the experiences of our guest speakers, exploring the successful strategies that they have employed in different international settings, how these strategies garnered results, and what they have learned from these experiences. Whilst there is no one-size-fits-all approach to successful schooling and leadership, we aim to uncover individual stories and themes to success to contribute to wider conversation on what makes a school successful. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Can we start with a quick round of introductions? Christine, would you mind starting?
Yeah, no problem. My name is Christine Woods. I'm the principal of an all-through school in the United Arab Emirates. My emirate is Sharjah, which is next door to Dubai. And I'm really happy and grateful to be here with you today. Thank you.
And Mel?
Hi, I'm Mel Hitchcocks. I'm the principal of the British International School in Ljubljana. We are also an all-through school, 3 to 18.
Thank you. And Lauren?
Yeah, I'm Lauren Binnington. I am currently Director of Learning at a school in Bahrain. I've only been here since August. Prior to that, I was in Vietnam for 13 years in various different roles. But yeah, we're also an all-through school in both of those places as well. Yeah.
Thanks. And James?
Hi, my name is James Mattiace. I was formerly an upper school principal and assistant principal at 2 different international schools, and I now work as the Director of Outreach for the Big Questions Institute.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today for this discussion. So a real opportunity to talk about then strategies for whole school success. So we're going to start with James. So professional development is key for progress, for transparency and motivation. Can you explain your experiences of harnessing professional development for greater school success?
Sure, absolutely. It's been, when I moved into an admin role, it was a piece that I took on as part of the admin team, that I agreed that I would take on a lot of the professional development opportunities by restructuring the way we did it. Of course, schools always have had professional learning opportunities, you know, and moving from public schools in the US to when I first moved overseas in 2007 to Morocco, you know, just the availability of professional development opportunities was just mind-blowing. Mm-hmm. And so I really, when I moved into administration, I really wanted to make sure that those opportunities were available for everybody. And so we worked to increase the professional development budget. It was small for individual teachers. The school-directed PD was large, but the individual teachers-directed PD was small. So we worked to revamp that. I found a ton of free opportunities that were happening, able to get those in front of teachers and let them know through professional associations. And then I would share that in our weekly update that went out to all the faculty on Sunday afternoons, letting them know what was there, what was available, how to apply for it. Come see me if you needed maybe a backdoor to get in through joining a different organization, which would give you free access. But really the stuff that I found most valuable and what I really worked hard to build is the teachers teaching other teachers. And so we have such a wealth of professional knowledge on staff that providing those opportunities. So on Tuesday afternoons, we set up a rotating library of teachers who would volunteer to present. And everything from how to use a drone on campus. We had one school, we had a bunch of drones. We had teachers really efficient at that. So we had drone classes. We had things on how to use Excel to design for unit planning. Just a whole library of strategies that the teachers had, and that they could then bring to their colleagues. And I wasn't successful, but I was trying to record those so that we had a library that people could refer back to, but I never quite managed to be in the same place with the camera at the same time as the PD was happening. So that was still a goal. And the last thing I'll say is for teachers who served on committees, one committee in particular, as a kind of a reward for those teachers, I managed to secure funding to take everybody, there was 6 of us, to the International Conference on Thinking in Miami, which was a PD that was completely unrelated to anybody's particular field, but it was just a great learning experience. And so we went to Miami for 5 days and went to that conference, and that was kind of a reward for all the time that those teachers put in on our assessment committee and building our assessment design. So that's just one last piece there, but I'm sure the others have tons of other ideas. So I'm looking forward to learning what they have to say.
Yeah, I mean, loads of opportunities to really utilize professional development outlined there. Has anybody else kind of used those types of things, or anything slightly different?
Yeah, we do. We've started teachers teaching other teachers. We find that's really, really helpful. You know, I mean, I still teach, but the vast majority of SLT across the world, I think, usually don't, or they just teach ad hoc. And, you know, it's all very well us leading, see what quite often happens, particularly in international schools, but we're not necessarily at the coalface. And I think, you know, kids learn better from kids. And I think it applies to teachers as well. So we just started the journey of introducing coaching, and we're going down the route of, we're doing it in a small way, but the idea is not next year, but the year after, that we do it with all teachers coaching each other. And another one of the schools in our group already does that. And I think that's a great piece of CPD. At the moment, we have PLCs. So we have small communities where teachers choose a particular topic that maybe they want to develop in their practice, and they go along and speak to other teachers, and they're learning from each other. So I think that what James is saying about teachers learning from other teachers is a really good point.
Yeah, we do something very similar. So we have our performance management is based on the first lesson observation we do of each academic year. And from that comes individual personalized CPD. We put them into PLCs and make sure that they work together, and identify the good practice. So we do rotation of CPDs, and we put everybody and give them a choice of where to go based on their performance management targets. And it is delivered by those teachers who have been identified as performing well in that area. So I think we're all agreeing that using those teachers in the classroom who have been identified as good in those areas really does enhance the experience for the teachers.
Yeah.
I'm finding it really interesting, the sort of similarities and the differences and everything that everyone has just said. I'm sort of nodding along with yes, the teachers teaching other teachers thing. I think that is a really, really powerful tool. But I was also just then inwardly smiling because one of the things that I'm trying to do in my school this year, having taken over a really strong professional learning program from my predecessor, is sort of differentiating between professional development and professional learning. And I can't take credit for this idea. This was something a former colleague in my previous school did, and it's an idea that I've poached as I've moved. But the idea of professional development as the sort of A to B type courses that people go on, and then trying to develop this ongoing professional learning culture as well, and seeing everybody in the school as a learner. So we have a professional learning program here whereby we have what we call inspire and introduce sessions that involve guest speakers coming in or online. They do a sort of 2 to 3 hour introduction and inspiration session in their area, whether that's to do with metacognition, or we've had oracy, or great teaching and learning, AI use, and so on. And then the group of teachers who are involved in that, they go away, and for about 6 weeks, they work on that within their practice, and they come back together for a sort of a 45-minute review and reflect on how that's gone. And it's been a fantastic program. We've had over 15 different speakers involved in that learning, and what I'm doing for next year is extending that, so it's actually going to be a year-long pathway. So you have your Inspire session, you then go away and do some action research, you see what strategies work in your classroom setting, you come back together every 3 to 4 weeks on a Tuesday, incidentally, to talk through how it's worked. And at the end of the year, we're going to have a big teach meet sharing session of what's been learned across the course of the year. So it's just differentiating that a little bit and extending that learning for colleagues throughout the whole year. So it's really interesting seeing those similarities, and then how it works in the different contexts.
That sounds fascinating, Lauren. And what a great opportunity to really see what's working in the classroom and to reflect on that practice over time to see, well, yeah, this has really worked, or this not so much, and kind of develop that into your practice more and more. and really see that CPD kind of working on the ground. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, everybody. So Christine, I wanted to also ask you about your experiences of student-centered learning. How have you put students at the centre of your school, and how has this impacted school development?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting concept and that has been about since education started. Student-centered learning is ideally what we do day in, day out. But my personal definition of that has changed over time. When I first became a maths teacher back in 1993, I realized that when I was planning lessons, I needed to plan with a visual of the children the children I was about to teach. I couldn't take a lesson off the shelf and just teach it, or teach the same lesson that I taught last year, because the characteristics and the dynamics in the classroom is different every time. So I became very aware of my need to plan a lesson and think about each and every child in the classroom as I was planning it. And then I had the fortunate opportunity to become a personalised learning advisor for the county council for over 500 schools for a few years. And again, that helped to support my definition and view of what it meant to have student-centered learning. But I think, unfortunately, back in the UK, when the DfE introduced personalised learning back in 2004, they then still tried to create a system or a model which sort of contradicted what the idea of student-centered learning and personalized learning is all about, because there is no model, there is no system. It's about knowing the children and choosing the right strategy out of a toolbox for that class, those children, that group of children. And even now, when we have adaptive AI systems, platforms that adjust accordingly to the answers, the previous answers that children have given, excuse me, to personalize their experience. Again, it's a system, it's a strategy, it's something that takes a formula and creates an experience for a child. And I think all of these things were all created with good intentions, but for me now, student-centered learning just means knowing the children very, very well, knowing them, their families, their experiences, and making sure that everything you do has their needs at the core of what you plan, what you do, how you intervene, how you support, how you adjust your support. So the definition, if you actually look at it, I had a look today, and the best definition I've found for it is that it's a fuzzy concept that refers to a vague assortment of teaching strategies. And I love that, because that's exactly what it should be. It should not be something that's defined. It should not be something that is the same for every child or a formula that you apply. It's just you getting to know. So in our school, our school's only been open 3 years, and I was the founding principal, and we decided our main focus was going to be setting a culture and ethos first before anything else, and making sure that the relationships were built well. And what we do every beginning of every academic year is that we focus the first 2 weeks just on relationships, just on getting to know the children. And as we do that, we do conduct baseline assessments through questioning and through fun quizzes and so on, so we can get an idea. But we literally just focus on relationships. And at the end of the first week, every single one of our teachers will send an email to parents saying something specific and personalized that's amazing about the child, so that they've got to know the child, and will personally have a conversation with the parent about what's great about their child and how lucky they are to have them as part of their classroom. And then, so the first conversation is always an incredibly positive, personalized conversation. And what we then find is that when we do have to have difficult conversations with parents later, that wonderful relationship, home-school relationship, has already been sorted. So the parents take any concerns much more easily when you've already built that relationship. So, you know, summing it up for me, it's really genuinely, there's no strategy, there's no structure, there's no anything. It's just knowing the children well enough. And we all know, those of us especially who are parents, we know you never bring our children up the same way. I've got two, and I brought them both up very differently based on their needs, what motivates them, what engages them. So for me, you have to find out what engages the child, what motivates them, what their hobbies are, and then use that to bring the learning to them and from them. And so for me, student-centered learning is just about that, getting to know them, understand them, love them, find out about their families, and then everything that you plan and everything that you do for the rest of the academic year then becomes much more simple. So we have wonderful families, but a lot of our families also, for the first time in any school that I've ever worked in, we actually run parenting support classes after school for parents who are struggling with the parenting role. And luckily, in our community, the parents are very receptive to it and come in and talk to each other about their concerns, their worries, anything that they're struggling with, especially around setting boundaries for their children, what the definition of love is, because I always say love's at the center of our school, but that means setting boundaries with love. It's not allowing children to do whatever they want to do. That's not a sign in school of showing that you love and care and want to keep them safe. So for us, we do everything we can to get to help support and cherish each children for who they are personally.
Wow. It sounds like you're doing incredible things to really build those relationships with parents, and so to support young people's well-being, and also, yeah, like you said, to then lean on them when you do need to have those conversations, and really supporting them to build those boundaries as well. Are there any other reflections on that, on kind of developing student-centered learning?
Well, from that, as I said, you can look back at all the research. I can look back at all of the strategies that were researched, identified, and have been shown to have some impact, and use the right ones for the right students. And so that's what we actually do. We give the teachers through CPD and all that. That's why it all connects. Yeah. The different strategies, different ideas, different techniques to make sure that each child feels that their needs are being met. And it, you know, it could be a bit of making sure there's some kinesthetic learning in there, but also, you know, dual coding. So there's all kinds of different strategies that we are constantly presenting to our teaching community so that they can pick and choose which strategy works for which child, because they get to know them so well.
Are there any other reflections that anybody else had on this? If we're happy, we can move on to the next question. I
can jump in.
Yeah,
sorry,
James.
I've become increasingly more radicalized as I've gotten older. And luckily I now work for an organization that is pushing to change the structure of education, because a lot of what we do know about learning is not supported by our schools. The actual physical structure of the schools doesn't allow, I mean, we don't learn, you know, maths for 60 minutes and then go learn Spanish for 60 minutes as humans. That's not how we learn, right? We don't learn we don't learn by age level too. Like all 5-year-olds will learn this, all 7-year-olds will learn this. And so as I've become more and more advanced in experience and age, I really am struggling with the current structures of our school systems and how they get in the way of the exact kind of learning that Christine is talking about. And how to truly be student-centered, we really have to blow up our model. I just heard a really good podcast the other day that the person who's speaking said we talk about the science of learning, but really what it is the science of making other people learn, right? That's what it is we pull out all these tips and tricks to force students to learn, because the structure that we've set up isn't conducive to them learning. And so I'm always curious and always looking for new ideas. And it sounds like what Christine's doing is one of those revolutionary new ideas. That's actually got a lot of history in the past, right? It goes all the way back to Socrates and this idea of learners being able to ask questions and explore the areas of their own interest for them. But like I said, the current system is not set up for that. So looking to reform that.
I must say, I'm so fascinated by what you're saying, Christine and James, about all these strategies that we can put in place to put students at the center of their learning. And I'm so on board with what you're saying. I don't know if I'm just coming from an experience of being in such a big school and trying to do that, you know, on the ground, of moving through and teaching so many different students a day, trying to manage everybody's individual needs, you know, daily, in a very fast-paced school. The reality of that for educators sometimes is really challenging. How are you supporting young people? How are you supporting your educators, rather, to really have that knowledge to kind of drill into each of these learners?
I think going from a secondary background to an all-through school has really helped, because the role of what we call now the homeroom teachers in an all-through school is much better utilised than the role of the form tutor was when I was a principal in a secondary school. And I think, you know, there has to be that maternal, paternal person at the centre who knows that child inside and out, not somebody who just does the attendance at the beginning of the day and checks uniform. The children need to have somebody who they trust, who can go to, who knows when the child walks in and something's off, and the child is not behaving the same way they normally do, and can have that relationship to bring out of the child, what is it that's going to prevent you from learning today because there's something unsettled with you. And for me, that's the only way to do it, especially in secondary age children who are going to many different teachers every day. There has to be that one standard. And I think, you know, I've been lucky enough to go down pastoral routes as well as academic routes in my career. And always with the pastoral route, I'm thinking, please utilize the form tutors more. And, you know, there needs to be a clear understanding that all teachers, whether they're primary, EYFS, whether they're secondary, whether they're, you know, at university level, they're teachers of people and children. They're not teachers of subjects. And this also relates to what James was saying. You don't have 60 minutes of mathematics and it makes sense and then go on to do 60 minutes of science where you're doing bar graphs in both, but one teacher's teaching slightly differently from the other. That doesn't make any sense to children, and it shouldn't make any sense to children. And really, for us in our school at the moment, we've been managed because the school only opened to the end of year 4 initially. So we've managed to take all that good practice that happens with homeroom teachers in primary and continue that into secondary. So there isn't this huge gap and transition between primary and secondary, where in primary you're looked after and you have someone to, you know, hug you every day, and then you go into secondary and nobody seems to care about you anymore. That's not how, and we've made a concerted effort to make sure that all of our children every day feel valued, loved and cared for, and that there's someone there that is their person, and that is the homeroom or the form room teacher, depending. And I think that I've learned from this all through school so many positive things that happen earlier on, that we shouldn't stop just because the children are older. They're still children and they still need that support, and we still need to, as we say, put them in the center of everything. And you can only do that if you know them. And you can only do that if you have somebody in school who is willing to be that person for them, advocate for them, fight for them, know them so well. So that for me was the missing part in secondary when I was in the UK, is not using that role in a way that would best suit the students.
Can I just pick up on something there? Because Christine, something you just said there really resonated with me about that idea of the pastoral role of everybody. I think so. It's that one person that knows them really well, but also I'm also from a senior school background. I'm a psychology teacher, and now I've been in a whole school role for the last 4 years. So moving from that, you know, very top of the school to looking at the whole way through. And I totally agree with you that the way things are done in primary generally in that sense does tend to have that person who really knows the children. And I think when you're talking about student-centered learning, there's a lot that can be learned from early years, particularly in that play-based approach and very, very child-led approach to learning. But also one of the things that we've talked about over time is the idea that students need to be supported in their academics, their well-being, and their character development as well. And so every moment, whether you are a subject teacher or a form teacher or a class teacher, or you're just walking down the corridor when you're going from your classroom to the staff room, every interaction you have with a child is a pastoral moment. And so while it's important that there's that one person that knows them really well, it's also important that your entire staff body, whoever that might be, teachers, teaching assistants, support staff, are coming at things from a pastoral perspective as well, so that those children can go to anybody, and that is there. And one of the things that we used to do as part of recruitment in my previous school was, whether we were recruiting for a maths teacher or a science teacher or a class teacher, I would always ask them the question as part of that interview process of, what is the pastoral role of a maths teacher? And most people would respond with, well, as a maths teacher, I will also be a form tutor and I will do this, this, and this. And I would say, no, that's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, with you in your classroom, what is your pastoral role with the children in front of you as you are teaching them, as you are giving them feedback, as you're designing your classroom activities? How are you making them feel safe in your classroom, and what's your role in that? And so it becomes that it's just part of what everybody is doing. And I think that's also important as well.
Yeah, what an incredible insight. Thank you so much for sharing, Lauren. I really like that idea that we're all pastoral teachers, that it's a part of the role as well as being a subject leader. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next question. And Lauren, you're leading on this for us. So curriculum development involving personalising learning to establish and maintain standards is crucial for school success. Could you share some of your successes with curriculum development and the impact that this has had?
Yes, absolutely. Curriculum development, gosh, it's such a huge area, right? That I think the key word in that is development, that your curriculum is never finished. And I think that is the slight challenge sometimes with particularly the older age range, where we are bound by our exam cohorts, that sometimes the curriculum can feel a bit like the list of bullet points that I must cover in my classes for them to jump through the hoop at the end. But I think it's really important with curriculum development that you start from a perspective of curriculum being the totality of experience as a child has. So our curriculum doesn't start and end in the classroom. The curriculum begins from the moment they walk through the school gates, and every interaction that they have with anybody on campus, they are learning. Children are sponges, right? They just soak up everything from everybody around them. So how you're interacting with them, how they're seeing you interact with other adults, and how they see you interact with other children is also really, really important part of that as well. So I think of the curriculum as that totality, that it's what's happening in the classroom, it's the content, it's the skill development, it's how you provide feedback, how you set up your activities, but it's also the events that you put on as a school, it's the assemblies, it's the messages that you are giving. So I think that's really important when you're thinking about curriculum development, to not just think about what is happening in my classroom, it's about the broader aspect and element of that. And one of the things that we've done at my school here in Bahrain is to really think about that from a competency perspective of how do we make sure that we're developing in young people the competencies, the skills, the knowledge, the attributes to be able to succeed. And that means success for them now and in the future. And we call it our future ready curriculum. And I like to think of it as being ready for the next phase, whatever that might be. So our year 2s going into year 3 and so on. How are we preparing them for that next phase of their learning? And so we've structured that competencies around different areas to do with well-being, academic competencies. Metacognition plays a huge role in that as well. Digital literacy and digital responsibility is a key area there, as well as service and enterprise and well-being as well being key areas. And so we like to think of everything that is going into what they're learning in the classroom through their subjects and what they're learning through our ECA program is all tied in some way to those competencies, enabling them to become, you know, compassionate and confident young people. And that's sort of where we've gone with our curriculum development. The other thing that I think is really important in curriculum development is making sure that the experiences that children are having, and I think this goes back to something, James, you were talking about earlier with sort of the structures of school and how it can be quite stifling in a way, the structures that we have, is making sure that you're teaching out of the classroom window. And so you're taking the world outside and you're bringing it in, but you're also taking the children out into the outside world as well. So whatever you're doing with your curriculum and your curriculum development is reflecting the world around us. And we've all seen that, haven't we, in our careers? The nature of what we're talking about and the challenges that young people face have changed. More schools now are talking about sustainability, for example, and climate change beyond in geography we learn about or in science we learn about. It's actually how are we developing the critical thinking, the problem solving skills, the collaboration skills, the diplomatic skills through a range of different areas to be able to go on and work together to tackle some of these issues, because that is essentially what young people are going to be facing. So I think that for me, when we're talking about curriculum, it's really about how we're preparing them for that next phase, whatever that next phase may be. And ultimately, are we enabling young people to have those skills to go on and make the impact that they want to make, wherever that may take them, whatever pathway they go down, are they equipped to do that? And that's got to be really at the heart of curriculum development for me.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. This is, like Lauren was saying, this is such a broad topic that I'm sure everybody obviously has got some views on, because it's something that's so imperative for all schools. Has anybody else got some reflections they wanted to share?
I'm just saying, Lauren, everything you said really resonates with me. I can just remember when I first started teaching and everyone used to say, you know, we're preparing children for jobs that don't even exist now. And I remember thinking at the time, how can that be possible? Surely all the jobs that will ever exist happen now. And now you've got all of the YouTubers and the, you know, there's just so many things, and they were so right. And that's why I love being able to teach a skills-based curriculum, because and it comes back to what James was saying, we've still got assessment so badly wrong, because we're still assessing them on content and what they can Google and find out. And we need to be more realistic about how we need to educate our children nowadays. It has to be skills-based. It has to be things that bring out their own talents that they can use and support the future of taking the global world forward. And, you know, to just still be, what can you regurgitate, and we'll decide if that amount of information you've stored in your head can give you a or a 9 or whatever, however it's assessed nowadays. And I think that is the biggest part of my frustration, is how we assess children, because we're not assessing them on what they need to be successful citizens anymore. And that really needs to be addressed quickly and urgently. And I'm with James and with Lauren on all of that, about what it is that the curriculum should and needs to be to be able to prepare our children for the future.
Yeah, I'm all in on the competency-based education idea. And I wonder too, I graduated high school 30 years ago. And I wonder if my teachers, I went to a great high school in New York City. It's a fantastic high school. The school's 180 years old. It's got a legacy. But I wonder if my teachers thought that they were preparing me for my current future now. Or if it was just get through the curriculum. I don't know. I honestly, it's a genuine question. I don't know what their mindset was. And just like Christine was saying, these jobs that didn't exist 30 years ago when I was graduating high school, was there any thought into that at that time? And I don't know. I generally, I don't know if I can find out. I have to track some of them down, see if they're still alive, right? But and I think about my own. I started teaching myself in '97, and I wasn't teaching with the idea of, and I was teaching high school economics. I wasn't teaching with the idea of 20 years from now, right? I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about get these kids through economics, get them graduated, get them jobs, right? Or get them into university. And I don't think I really started thinking about future like possibilities until probably 2012, 2013, when I really started thinking about what am I really training these students to do? Like, and started really focusing on problem solving and critical thinking. Working the IB helps as well. The IB gives you some of those structures, but also there's that huge content you have to get through also. But yeah, I don't know when and where I made the mind shift, but it definitely did happen for me. I just not in the beginning of my career for sure.
Thank you so much for sharing, James. Yeah, I think I always think about what are the foundations that we want them to leave with. Yeah, you know, what is it that they're going to be leaving with that's really going to set them up? And I think that that's what, you know, that's really kind of the sum of what everybody has shared here, is how do we really set them up for those jobs that even now don't exist yet, but you know, when they leave school in 5, 6, however many years time, will be out there. And it's constantly trying to address their needs in terms of the curriculum need and what they'll need then to kind of flourish as an individual in a completely modern society. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing those thoughts. Mel, I wanted to ask you about strategic planning. So strategic planning is key for success. Can you explain the process of joining a new school and gaining trust, and then mapping out school development plans to implement change?
Okay, well, excuse me, I think we're all doing that a little bit. Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of preaching to the converted probably, so I do apologise because I probably have less experience than most of you. I'm in my 4th year of headship, but this is my first year in this school. My last school was I took over the school 6 weeks before lockdown, so there was nothing strategic about it. It was just, you know, get in and sort it out. So I suppose that some of the advice that I would give you is, or I would give people watching this, reading this, is to go and visit the school first. I didn't get an opportunity to do that with my first school, and I think it's really important to listen to staff. And I think most people in leadership, we see things and we think, right, okay, that needs fixing. Let's go fix that and let's do it that way. And actually and I'm learning this as I go along, so I'm not saying I'm an expert, that isn't the way that we should be doing it. We need to listen to the people that are already there. I think one of the big mistakes that I made when I first came here was thinking I had a great idea and then finding out a little way down the line that they'd done that before and it hadn't worked, and everyone's nodding at me. So I assume that everyone's been there and done that. So, you know, listening for me is the really big thing, and talking and asking questions of people. And that's something we've done a lot this year. I have a fairly new SLT, and we really are listening to people, getting feedback from staff. We've learned the hard way that we haven't done that to start with, so now we're doing that. And actually, you know, lots of brains are better than just a few, and they quite often come up with great ideas, and we think, yeah, why didn't we think of that? And you get people on board. Doing that is much easier to persuade people if, you know, half of everybody is already wanting to do it. So I would say, you know, go and visit the school first, listen to people, and then think about your pivotal roles in the school. I was lucky enough to be able to sort of move people around a little bit when I first came. And that was really interesting because I inherited a couple of people who were absolutely brilliant, but weren't doing the jobs that they really wanted to be doing, and weren't doing the things that were playing to their strengths. And again, this was just talking to them and actually digging a bit deeper and finding out actually that's what they want to do, and there's a gap here, and so that person could be moved there and they can really shine doing what they feel that they should be doing. And that's worked really, really well for us. The other thing is gaining trust, and you know, talking about having that visit, and then there was about a period of about a month, 6 weeks before I came into post, because I started sort of midway through the year, and keeping contact with people after the visit, you know. And when you get here, very much having an open door policy. Yes, as principals, as anybody in teaching, we all have lots and lots of work to do. I was saying at the beginning that I've had a day where I just haven't felt like I haven't done anything I should have been doing. But equally, what I have done is probably more important than what I think I should have been doing, because I have that open door policy, and I think most successful principals do, so that people can come in and talk to you. And I think another piece of advice is, and this is something that I've learned this year, is yes, you come into a school or you start a school, and you have your ideas and you want to implement change, but don't try and do it all at once. And you know, you really do, and this goes back to talking to people, listening to people. You need to take everyone with you, and it can feel frustrating sometimes. You can kind of see where you want to be, and you know, you think, well, I could take that really fast train and get there much quicker, but actually you can't do that, because you've got to take people with you. And so, you know, I think it's really important to make sure that you do things properly and slowly, and sometimes that might mean not working to the time scale that you may have in your head, which is probably only in your head and not in anybody else's. And lastly, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about recruitment. And again, I was lucky enough to be able to start the recruitment for the new year, because I joined in April, the month before I started the school. But I think, you know, it's vital that whoever you're recruiting in a school, you get them with a philosophy that aligns with your own. So getting involved early in recruitment, so that you are getting a team which is working together, and not having, you know, people with different philosophies that are all working at odds with each other. So I mean, that would be my advice, for what it's worth, for new principals or people starting off with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so valuable, and you could see lots of people nodding in agreement with what you were saying there. Are there any other reflections that anybody wanted to share?
I think the listening thing resonates with us all. Anyone that's done any kind of school improvement knows you cannot take a model from one school and put it in another. It will never work. Otherwise, all schools would have the same vision, values, and mission statements, and they're not. We serve a different community with every school that we become part of. And again, I was lucky enough in my very first headship to join the school in April. It's the best thing. It's just the best thing, because you don't have to do anything new until September. So you get the time,
you have that time.
Watch.
Yeah.
Yes, you just watch what's going on, and you don't make any knee-jerk reactions. I was actually talking today to my coach and saying what I've learned to do, especially in times of crisis, because Dubai has been in a crisis over the last week. And in times of crisis, I've learned from experience, you do not make rash knee-jerk decisions. If I decide an hour from now that actually we're going to close the school tomorrow, is that really going to have a different impact than if I decide right now? And so all of these things that you learn to do and listen and think and look at the pros and cons of your decisions. I made some ridiculous decisions in my first headship, and I look back and I cringe, and I just think, oh my goodness, I'm so glad that I have that experience behind me, where you just cannot say this worked here. It annoys your staff so much when you have a new principal coming in and saying, in my old school, we did it this way. It just irritates them, because again, as Mel, you said, you've got teachers who say, well, if you'd have asked us, we'd have told you we tried that in our school. Yeah. It didn't work. It doesn't work in our community. It doesn't work because of the experiences that our teachers and our students and our community has had in the past. And so to listen and then take things forward is without a doubt the the best thing that you can do, and if you get the chance to do it and have that time and join in April for any school, it's a blessing, absolute blessing.
I was laughing there. Sorry, I was laughing there, Christine, just as you said that phrase, in my last school, because having moved this year after 13 years somewhere and then moving to a new school, honestly, I must have said that phrase so many times, and you have to catch yourself and go, nope, that's not. Yeah. So it's you know, when you get yourself down to maybe saying it once per every couple of weeks and catching yourself on it, I think you're onto a bit of a roll there.
I was going to say I had the fortune of being in a school and then moving into leadership, so I knew the school fairly well, and so I didn't make those initial mistakes about my previous school because I was in the school, and then I did move to a new school, and I, you know, before I arrived, I sent an email to all the staff and asked them those basic questions like what's working, what's not, what's your vision for the school, and had invited them to set up Zoom meetings with me, which I did the whole spring. One of the things that I work with now with BQI, when we go into schools and do strategic planning, the first question we ask is, what is sacred? And that pulls a lot out, because you realize what are those things. Different people hold different things to be sacred, but when we put that all on a Padlet and then step back and look at it and have community members look and see, oh yeah, we really do value this, and then we know what are the things we're not going to touch, what are the things that are essential, and that word sacred, I think, gives people the idea of that this is really something that's special, not just like a value that I hold, but it's what does the school community hold as sacred, and then we build from there. And it's also interesting too to look at those things that schools say that they hold sacred, and then what are the things that they put out on their masthead? Like what are the things they're promoting, and a lot of times they're not the same, right? So you may say we hold sacred individual learners and risk taking, but then your thing is, here's the number of students that got into Ivy League schools last year, right? So the things that we promote are different than the things that we hold sacred, and reconciling, helping schools to reconcile those two things is some of the work that we do. But really, it's asking people first, like, what are we not supposed to touch, and then go from there. And I think as far as coming in and being able to talk about your previous school, I don't see anything wrong with that. There is the expression, we call them suitcase directors or suitcase principals, because they bring the suitcase from previous and they open it and they take everything out. Don't do that. But it is, I mean, if things did work, it's okay to bring them up. You know, they're not off limits. But I certainly don't be imposing them as this is the only thing I know is what's in this suitcase. I'm not going to do anything different. Including, I've seen some directors come in, they don't take the letterhead off the previous school's letterhead. It put the plan out with the previous school's letterhead on it. So clearly, you know where that came from, and they didn't put a lot of thought into it as well. So, but it is okay for anybody who's listening who's thinking, oh, I can't reference my previous school. You can, just don't ram it down anybody's throat.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing your reflections. It's been such a fascinating discussion to hear about all of your experiences of leadership, and how all of these things then have kind of led you into the positions that you're in today, and strategies that have really helped kind of develop the way that you lead your schools, and the successes then that has led to. So I wanted to finish with, and this is difficult because I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of very similar thoughts here, but if we can try and if we've got something slightly different, that would be great. But is there a little kind of nugget of wisdom, a school strategy, something that you'd like us kind of to leave us thinking about today in terms of school improvement?
I love what is sacred. I wrote that down straight away. It has a real strong emotional attachment to it, and you know, really gets underneath the stuff that is important, but actually, no, don't touch this. And so that is something I'm definitely going to take away and use in future. So thank you.
Yeah, I really like that question. I think it was Lauren that said, or it might have been Christine, what is the pastoral role of you know, a maths teacher or whatever? I'm definitely going to add that to my list of interview questions, because I think that's something we often, particularly when you are talking to somebody, you know, a secondary teacher, and you're interviewing for that, you're so focused on the subject and other areas of school life. And that's something that we forget, that we are all involved in the pastoral side of our children's lives. And, you know, that's an important question to ask. So thank you for that. I will take that one away.
Something that Christine said earlier that I didn't think about in my initial answer, but implemented instructional rounds in the last 2 schools I was in. And for those who aren't familiar with instructional rounds, it's when a group of teachers, 4 to 5 teachers, goes into another teacher's classroom during release time and then observes that teacher, and then afterwards debriefs what they learned by watching that teacher. And one of the great things is when you take, in my first school I did it, and it was a high school only, so it was high school teachers observing high school teachers. But in the second school, it was grade 1 through 12. So it was great taking that crusty crusty maths teacher and having them go in and watch a first grade class, and then understanding what they picked up, and definitely the pastoral piece, but also just learning how to, if you can, you know, keep 15 6-year-olds all going in the same direction, then you can teach an AP calculus class, right? There's two, the skill set is essential and basic, but I think that doing that interaction, de-siloing the classroom and getting teachers into each other's classrooms and seeing how all the professionals are operating increases the level of respect for everybody, but also really gives you a new perspective on what, as a high school person, you know, was high school my entire career, getting into a first grade classroom is, wow, this is a whole other world. But it's great to see the debrief and the reflections when those high school teachers do get to do that.
One of the takeaways from this particular conversation, Christine, I think it was you who used the word love earlier. I think that idea of leading and learning with love is really, really powerful. And oftentimes we shy away from that word because it is quite a big word. But actually, that should really be at the heart of what we're doing in a school. You know, teachers who love what they're doing, students who love coming to school, and those loving relationships that you have between all members of the school community. I think that's really, really important. And it linked to, you know, Mel, when you were talking about moving schools and doing that kind of implementation work or strategic thinking about kind of staying true to yourself as well and your values. And I think that love also extends to you and yourself, because I think everything that we do has to be done with authenticity. And sometimes when you're in the leadership role, or you're maybe new into it, or you've moved somewhere, or you're starting a new plan for the first time, it can draw you off course sometimes, and it feels challenging, maybe like it's not quite true to where you started. But I think if you continually hold on to your values and return to those and just share those with everybody at every opportunity, I think for me that's what's really, really important in sort of leadership, but actually in all areas of the school, that you really are true to who you are and to yourself. So the idea of love for all, I think, is really important. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's been such a pleasure to listen to your reflections and your insights and your experiences. Thank you for talking so openly about all of this with us. I'm sure that this is going to be really valuable for other leaders who, early leaders or more senior leaders who've kind of experienced some of this. So yeah, thank you so much. And you can learn more about each of our speakers here underneath this discussion. And this will be released, just so everybody knows, this is on the podcast as well as here in this video. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure.